Hey guys, Neil here with a highly controversial video today. I pre-warn you in advance. We're going to be talking about these new government stimulus packages which are being rolled out all around the world right now and why they may not be exactly how they seem. So let me start by asking you a question. In these times of uncertainty and government bailouts and all this free money that's going to be coming to us, the question is, have you stopped to think about where this money is actually coming from? Because if you think it's the government, you'd be mistaken. And you'd be forgiven for having that assumption, because this is a lie that's been rolled out since we were all children, and it's still being told to us right now. Because right now I'm going to tell you something absolutely shocking that 99.999% of the world has no idea that is true. The shocking truth is that central banks such as the Federal Reserve are not owned by the governments of those countries. These central banks are private institutions owned by shareholders. And if you don't believe me, let me show you. So I just did a Google search here to find out who actually owns the Federal Reserve Bank. And here's what it says. The Federal Reserve is not part of the federal government, but they exist because of an act of Congress. While the Board of Governors is an independent government agency, the Federal Reserve banks are set up like private corporations. Member banks hold stock in the Federal Reserve banks and earn dividends. So this really all started with Mayer Amschel Rothschild way back when. I'm not going to go into the whole Rothschild conspiracy. If you want to know more about the Rothschilds, then read this book here. And believe me, if that's the official book that the Rothschilds approved, I don't want to read the unofficial one. But basically, he said, permit me to control the monetary supply of any country, and I care not who makes the laws. Really important distinction, because this has just continued on for generations now. And what's even more shocking is that these central banks are not allowed to be audited. Not even the government, the US government, are not allowed to audit our own banks.
Republican Congressman and two-time presidential candidate Ron Paul wants to audit the Federal Reserve, arguing that Americans need to know more about the central bank.
Well, we don't have a lack of transparency.
You do. If you can't audit it, that's a lack of transparency.
So I regard the Federal Reserve as one of the most transparent central banks in the world. What we're talking about is political interference in decision-making.
And this video is just going to get even more shocking as I reveal more truths. Because we've already given too much power to these central banks. And now we're going to be giving even more and more power to the banks. And I can talk about this because I call both the UK and the USA home. So I know about the banking institutions, the economics of the country, the GDP, etc. I know about all this for both countries. So that's why I'm able to talk about it. Because right now I'm a lot more concerned about these few individuals or families or let's say shareholders that own these banks than I am about the going around. I'm not allowed to even talk about it because YouTube will de-index my video. So let me ask you a question then. Put yourself in the shoes of an investor, which many of you are like me. We're all investors, or you may want to be an investor in the future. So here's my question. If you're an investor, would you ever lend money to paint a sinking ship? Strange question, I know, but would you? Because I certainly wouldn't. So why right now are all these central banks as well as private banks lending all this money in truckloads to an economy that's about to collapse all around the world? So as we go through this video, I'd love it if you get involved and you drop your comments below in the comment section so that we can discuss this as a group. Oh, and don't forget to click the like button. And really to get some wisdom and inject some wisdom into this, in Proverbs 22:7 it states, "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." And that's some real wisdom there, because King Solomon was one of the wealthiest men to ever live. If he lived in today, like today's age, he would be worth over $2 trillion. So that's some wisdom we want to listen to there. So the question I'm asking here is, as nations, do we want to be slaves, our governments, do we want to be slaves to these banks that seem to be taking more and more control with every recession that comes about? If we look back to the 2008-2012 recession and the wealth transfer that was accumulated by the banks in asset seizures, it was unheard of. There's nothing like it that's ever existed to that scale in the history of our planet. And just to give you an example of that from the UK, there is currently a government initiative to loan money to small businesses to help them through the financial crisis. Great, sounds amazing on the face of it. But once you dig a little bit deeper into that, which I have, I called up the banks and I explained that I was interested in taking some business short-term financing at the 12 months interest-free period. Sounds great so far, right? Until, here's the catch. The bank said to me that I have to put up securities against the loan. Now, that doesn't sound like a free business loan to me if you've got to put up security against it, with the whole point that everyone knows right now we're about to go into a recession. I probably think we're going to be going into a depression. The government knows this, the central banks know this, the monetary policy people know this, and yet they're asking for business owners like you and I to put up security against a loan we take out, which is normal under normal circumstances. But in this current situation, this crisis, it seems a little bit unusual. Because just remember, the banks are not your friends. They put on all this beautiful branding and all these great images to make us think that they're our friends. But they're not our friends. They are draconian institutions looking to make a profit out of our misery. So let's look at the next question. How is it that these banks were able to set themselves up with these huge offices so quickly with all these expert loan advisors? We're talking tens of thousands of loan advisors throughout the country, already set up, ready to go to deal with this crisis. That seems a little bit suspicious to me. Now, I'm not throwing in a conspiracy and saying that the banks are behind the, I'm not saying any of that. But what I'm saying is, how is it they were ready so quickly to deal with this? And why are they just giving out money like it's going out of fashion? I'll tell you how easy it is. I downloaded the forms for these loans and the like. Some of them, and even these interest-free periods for 3 months off your loans and mortgages, things like that. Some of them, they're like 5 lines. They're 1 page long for a loan application. I've never heard of this before. I've been in this finance industry for a long time now. I've never heard of a 1-page loan application or 3 lines to get a repayment holiday. There's something not right. There's something going on here. And then combined with this, we have the media, aka the puppets, who are coming out with these stories all the time to say how kind the bank is, how great the central banks are for helping out the government, and the banks are so kind, aren't they? They're lovely people. Like, come on guys, get real. We're not that stupid. I don't know what the media thinks. They really think we're that stupid. This is just propaganda at its best. Inflation. If anyone thinks that inflation isn't going up as a result of all this extra money coming into the monetary supply, you're crazy. Because that's exactly what's going to happen. Inflation is going to go up. The price of goods and services are also going to go up as a result. Oh, and by the way, I've been to the Bank of England. Here's my pamphlet. So I know all about quantitative easing and the truth behind it. And I even cracked their vault game where they gave me this pen as a prize. By the way, it's a great pen. So what do I think of the bailouts for people, individuals, and small businesses? I personally think this is a great idea, and I think the governments have moved to do this very quickly, and it was a great decision. I completely, fully support that and stand by it. However, with that said, I really hope the government doesn't bail out the banks again this time, like they did in the last crisis, where we're left to pick up the can and pay for this through our taxes. Hold on, wait a second. The same banks that potentially own the central bank, who's lending money to the government so that the government can bail out those banks. Wow, that sounds like the best business model I've ever heard. Where do I sign up? Now let's come on to cash. Everyone is desperate for cash right now, especially pension providers, insurance providers, because so many people are calling in the cash that they desperately need. And because of this, or what contributes to this, is bonds. Bonds used to be seen as good as cash, but we've seen them dropping. Even before this financial crisis, people like me were warning of the bond market and the fact that usually when certain things happen in the bond market, it signals a recession. So this was even forecast before this whole came about. So because investors are not buying bonds, what are they buying then? They're buying US dollars. This is why the US dollar has been pushed up in recent days as investors flock to it. So as a result, the UK Monetary Committee is considering buying bonds directly from the Treasury. But hold on, wait, isn't the Monetary Policy Committee actually the Bank of England? Yeah, it is. So just remember, the central banks are not heroes here, ladies and gentlemen. They are lending the government money which they have created out of thin air, okay? They don't have this money. They are creating the money out of thin air by entering digits into a computer screen known as quantitative easing. Again, I've been to the Bank of England. I've also been to the Federal Reserve Bank. What's this called? Federal Reserve. Okay, we're in the Federal Reserve now. We've got to go through screening. It's pretty serious business. Can you imagine if you or I started to do what these central banks are doing and creating money digitally and putting it into the monetary supply? We'd be thrown in jail. So how does this impact you then? How does this impact the normal investor, the business owner, or just a normal employee or self-employed person? Most worryingly, taxes will go up. They have to. Once we get out of this difficult phase right now, taxes are going to go up significantly in order to pay back all of this money. Because they've really thrown the expression on its head. Short-term pain, long-term gain. No, this is short-term gain, long-term pain. And it is going to be long-term. It's going to be real long-term. So really you need to prepare yourself for this. But right now, let's just do what we normally do and kick the can down the road. So guys, I spent ages putting this video together for you. I even put in a couple of bits of humor, which is rare for an Englishman. So I'd really appreciate if you can click the like button. And if you want to protect yourself financially and learn about all of this stuff that I teach, then just make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you'll be doing yourself a massive favor financially. I promise you of that. And apart from that, Neil out.